and giggles, I'm like that anyway. Okay, started taking. I found socks in places in washing machines I didn't even know existed.
Wow.
They tip, you know where the bowl is?
On the traditional.
Yeah, where you put your clothes. Yeah.
Okay.
There's two bowls there. One holds the water, the other one holds your clothes. Well, they slip in between there and they get in there.
Yeah.
So they're in between the two bowls, and then they go down where the funnel is to go into the suction pump, and that's where they get sucked up and thrown out.
Lovely.
Well, since we have our front.
Yeah.
Teenagers do.
I
pulled nylon.
It had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, exactly.
I pulled those big nylon leggings from my daughter out of our front-loading washing machine down on that front. It wouldn't go. Like the washing machine wouldn't work right.
Oh my goodness.
And then I pulled it apart and the filter was clean. I pulled the filter up. What's wrong with that? I just happened to look down and look in and could see the back of the stocking had not made it into the filter. It was just sitting there behind the filter.
Wow.
So then I got the long needle nose pliers and grabbed the whole of it, pulled it out, and was like, but solved the problem. Hasn't come back since. But then again, my daughter moved out, so.
Okay, I guess we got to just hook up. So do you want, maybe I'll move this back here just so that these guys can have some. Guys have to have some coffee and donuts. Randy was so good to bring them to us. So they cannot be wasted.
You gonna put it here?
Sure.
Yeah.
Would you like me to? I don't want any donuts, but they're like not allowed right now. You know, it's funny. I don't like the front-loading wash machines, and I wish I'd never bought one.
Well.
Why? Because where I have it in my ensuite, I now know needs to be left open for air. Right. It's right in front of my toilet, so I have to always keep a garbage can in front of the freaking door. My door doesn't have that on it, and I don't know. But that was an issue with water, so water in them. I don't have a problem.
Well, I haven't had any problems. They're very big water efficiency savers.
I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. But they're getting top loaders now that are coming out to be almost as efficient.
Yeah.
So.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Selling mine at some point.
And I had a problem. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Are you online? Yes. There we go. Okay. Thank you for that.
I'll watch for questions and let you know.
Yeah, and I want this to be sort of a loosey-goosey kind of talk. I've got a couple of handouts here. I've got a water test it's old. It's from 2014, but what it'll help us do is learn how to read what the results are actually saying, because I get calls from real estate agents all the time saying, what's this mean? Right? What's RDL? What's, GS? So I just brought an old one along just because it has all the numbers in there and we can fill that in. But for the most part, you know, water is kind of a broad subject, so there's so many things that we can talk about under that. I'm just going to sort of start to talk off on different water tech topics, and then from there we can go into questions and answers, because it's mostly trying to educate you guys as to, you know, and if I'm just giving you a talk, you're not going to learn the answers to the questions that you guys have. So if anybody has questions, you might want to think about writing them down so that we don't forget them before the day is over here.
I'll keep an eye on that.
No, that's great. That's a great idea.
It's been helpful because a lot of agents, like I said, they just can't get in. So.
So this is like, we're all across. Well, you said there's one there from Ontario?
Yes, Shelley.
Shelley,
Yeah.
wow, welcome. So this came from, I'm a Pentair water treatment dealer, which is, I mean, Pentair is the largest water equipment production company in the world right now. So I deal with them. This is one of their things off of their YouTube training. So they have a full training thingy on YouTube, all kinds of different subjects about all kinds of different machines. But this one here, just basically I took just 3 pages off of it because the rest was just too much to even think about trying to talk about here today. So we're just going to run through some of the different things about impurities in the water, and, you know, whether they're metals or organics or whatever else you might come across. So are we good to start here now? Is everybody still straggling in? So before I begin, my name is Randy Miles. I'm with Blue Nose Water Cleaners. We've done quite a bit of work with numerous agents from this office, and we're always available to help you with any questions or emergencies that you have. I just got a call on my way here from another real estate agent. We're closing a property out in Enfield, and the homeowners and the real estate agents and the buyers of the house, everybody's got a problem. So, you know, the seller doesn't want to spend money, the buyer doesn't want to buy without the problems that they've come up with that get solved. So it's a typical transaction, real estate transaction, except out there, I don't know if anybody knows Enfield, the water's really hard. So that complicates my life because calcium does not fail the drinking water guidelines. You can have as much calcium in the water as you want. It won't affect, because it's calcium. Drink milk, calcium, right? Drink water with calcium in it, no difference. But when you turn around and soften that calcium, because calcium is what hard water is, it takes away from your soap, and that's all hard water is, no soap. So when you go to the Enfield by the gypsum mine there's no soap, right? So you put a water softener in, and now for every little piece of calcium in the water, we're going to pull that out, and we substitute in a piece of salt. That's the way a water softener works. That's why you buy those big bags of salt, and you pour them into the machine, and the machine regenerates and does its thing through that. But the complication is there's so much calcium in the water, you substitute so much sodium into the water, you now fail a mandatory acceptable concentration, which, by the way, there are 2 guidelines which we'll get into in that little, there's 2 pages of water, the aesthetics, which basically are things that are, they're visual, okay? They're visual. If you have iron in your water, you have an aesthetic problem because you're going to have stains all over the place. And then you have your mandatory acceptable concentrations, or your MACs, and the MACs are health concerns, arsenic, uranium, bacteria, coliform, things like that. So with that particular case out in Enfield, I start off with water that's safe to drink, and I end up with water that is not safe to drink when I soften it. So I complicated it. I just went from a passing, no problem to sell this house people, to, uh-oh, I just made you fail your water test. But now the customer can live in the house because they can actually get lather, so they can clean themselves, they can clean their laundry, they can do what they want to do. It's not going to stop their day, I guess, if you want to put it that way, where, you know, mandatory acceptable concentrations will shut your real estate deal down right in its tracks, right?
By softening the water?
By softening the water, we're increasing the sodium,
Right.
which now makes you fail the mandatory acceptable concentrations.
So what chemical actually fails?
Sodium. Sodium dehydrates you. So if you were drinking sodium all day long, you're going to dehydrate yourself.
Okay,
But that's the chemical breakdown. That's not like this standard would just be like bacteria, bacteria.
Well, that's just part of the mandatory acceptable concentrations. The bacteria, coliform, E. coli, all come under that same MAC guideline.
Okay.
But so does lead, so does arsenic, so does uranium. There's all kinds of things that fall underneath that category. And those categories are, important. You can't live in a house if those things are not there because you're just going to make yourself sick. And number one, banks being the money people, they will not give you the mortgage because the people moving into the house are going to get sick and can't pay their mortgage. So it's all about money when it comes down to the, it's not the lawyer per se who's saying, okay, you can't buy that house or you can't transact that house because of the water. It's the bank. The banks will not give the lawyer the money to complete the deal until the water is safe for them to live with. And a water cooler doesn't work, by the way. It doesn't meet the guidelines because who's going to say that the new people buying the house are going to buy water? They don't have to buy water. So it is a requirement that water has, the passing criteria at a tap. It doesn't have to be every tap in the house, but you have to at least have one source of clean drinking water in the house in order for that house to transfer during the sale. So, if you're listing a house, you want to find out if you've got any of the mandatory acceptable concentration failures before you let a buyer come into the house and do a water test, and now you got a bad taste in the buyer's mouth because, oh, look, they had lead. Who knew they had lead? Well, you could have found that out, but it does increase the cost of selling the house to the seller because they got to pay for the water test themselves to find out whether or not there's going to be a problem when they get somebody actually interested enough to put an offer in. And then all of a sudden, you got somebody like me coming in the door, doing a water test, and then coming back and saying, uh-oh, we got a failure here. And now you got all the stuff that happens when, people are fighting over who pays for this, who doesn't pay for that. But typically, if it is a mandatory acceptable concentration failure, the retailer or the seller of the property has to pay for that. You can't sell it, therefore the seller has to fix that before the buyer can buy it. Now, other things like the aesthetic objectives, buyer can buy the house, move in. If they choose to fix that and spend money out of their budget, that's their prerogative. It doesn't affect any health concerns. And like I said, out in the Enfield call there, they can buy that house and move in until we put the water softener in. Now they can't buy the house. But that's just, anybody that lives out in that area will know that they want that water softener because, my God, if you've ever gone into a house and seen a shower on hard water, it's just nothing but a layer of calcium all over everything. The shower walls.
Everything. Coffee machine,
Yep.
ironing, everything using your
Yep.
water.
Good point. Any heat attracts the calcium. So your hot water heater is doomed. Your coffee kettle is doomed. Dishwasher, everything just gets that nice, cloudy calcium buildup over everything, and it's like concrete. Try and take that off of that. You're not going, unless you get the hammer and chisel out in some cases, you're physically got something that's concrete layered onto your shower, and it's not easy to come back off. You can, acids, of course, are the way to get at it, but who wants to deal with acids every time you have to clean your shower? So you put in the water softener. The water softener substitutes the ions from calcium over to sodium. Last time I checked, you could put a little bit of water across the sodium and it'll just dissolve it and go right back down the drain. So the shower stalls become easier to clean even though you get a little bit of a buildup of calcium or something on the fixtures. It's not that big of a deal to fix up. But of course the calcium problem, kettles and expensive coffee makers don't last long. So, you've got to have something in place there to do that.
I have a situation like exactly.
Okay.
So what's the
Well, you put in a water softener,
yeah.
and then you soften the water, and then you put in a little reverse osmosis to remove the sodium from the drinking water. Okay. Now, reverse osmosis is it's a membrane separation. So we're taking water into the membrane, we're separating out the things that we don't want and sending them down the drain, which is where reverse osmosis is it's a huge waster of water. You're on average throwing about 60 to 70% of the water that you're using to produce your pure water, you're throwing it away. Now, on a small under-the-counter system, The water used is not enough to impact. But if you were to go into an application where the customer said, oh no, I want all the taps fixed all over the house, now you're putting in a whole house reverse osmosis system. Now you better have at least 3 times the amount of water in your well that the customer needs for the run of the day, because the reverse osmosis is going to throw the rest of that away. Now you got to have holding tanks to hold the water that you produce, and then a pump to pump it back, and UV lights to sterilize it because you've had it sitting in a big holding tank. Right, the whole thing just gets complicated.
The entrance of the house.
The water entrance, yes. So where the water comes in, you're going to reverse osmosis it, and then you're going to holding tank it, and then the water that comes out of the taps comes from that tank and up to the house.
See that? Fall River?
Yeah.
Hard water and then.
Yeah, and Fall River is right on that
Yep.
precipice of the Enfield gypsum belt.
So I would assume that most would just reverse osmosis for drinking.
Yeah. You can shower in that hard water.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't affect you, and you get out of the shower, you don't even realize it unless you happen to rinse your mouth out, and then you go, oh, there's salt in that water. Well, yeah, you can taste the salt when you get to that level, but at least you can shower in it, you can launder in it, you can flush your toilets in it. It doesn't affect your life.
So I have hard water. And how we discovered we had hard water, quite frankly, was spare bathroom. It's moved. The toilet wasn't being flushed
Right.
very, very often at all. And there's a buildup. There's water just sitting. So now we've got the water softener installed, just the typical salt one. But now what I'm wondering is if I put this reverse osmosis in, I have the fridge with the water and the ice. So if I put it underneath the sink, that still treat the ice maker and the...
That's one of the challenges, is when I see a refrigerator with ice and water, obviously you're not going to look at the customer and say, well, forget about that. So we try very hard to be able to incorporate that refrigerator. Now, if any of you agents have contractors that you deal with on new construction, that's a big tip that you can tell your contractor. Always feed the refrigerator water from the kitchen sink. Number one, if something goes wrong, you can reach underneath the kitchen sink and shut the water off to your refrigerator without having to pull the refrigerator out to get at the water supply. Number two, you can install one water treatment system underneath the kitchen sink and tap in the refrigerator to that. So if yours is done, then when we do that, we just tie them right in automatically, because there's no point in having a reverse osmosis system underneath your kitchen sink if your refrigerator's, right? Because the ice, oh my God, the ice out of a hard water application, when you put the softener in and you hook a refrigerator up, the salt is the last thing to freeze. So your ice cubes, you can take an ice cube and lick the top of it, it's pure salt.
I can try that.
Yeah, it's pure salt. But the reverse osmosis, of course, takes that salt out of the water, so now you're left with pure water, or as pure. So we can sort of just start, I guess. People online don't really have the form to see what I've got here, so we'll...
I'm going to email it to them, though.
Okay. Oh, yeah, you found it online?
No,
Oh, okay.
I will scan it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I will.
Because this whole thing is available online.
Oh, okay.
I just pulled it off of the YouTube website.
Okay. Okay, so would you let everybody know what the address is to go to get these forms in?
It's YouTube Pentair Training University or whatever, they have it in there. But if you just put Pentair, P-E-N-T-A-I-R, into the YouTube, there'll be all kinds of information there about all the different brands of water treatment systems, how to maintain them. They give you tutorials of, if you want to do it yourself maintenance, they show you how to tear the thing down, put it all back together. And then they also include a bunch of different information like this brochure here that I pulled. And that was, I think, a 10 or 12 page brochure that I just picked the 2-3 pages off that were...
The website again was, sorry.
It's YouTube.com/Pentair, P-E-N-T-A-I-R. Yeah, and it's Pentair University. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
So anyway, the first thing that they talk about here in page 7 is the aesthetic issues. And, aesthetic is referring to convenience things you can visually see, like stains, and physical buildup of minerals like calcium, like we were talking about, the hard water. They all contribute to that cloudiness and turbidity and just a general not fun water to live with. Before you got your water softener, you must have noticed the water wasn't real fun, right? Now you got your water softener, do you notice your hair, your skin, your laundry.
I even noticed shampoo.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing I noticed.
Where you're noticing that, your washing machine is also using less shampoo.
Well, the reason why we decided to do it was because buying the new high efficiency washing machines at quite fortune. I didn't want them.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And a new dishwasher. So same thing. I wanted to make sure that.
Yeah. So.
We just got to remember to fill it.
Yeah. And you know what? If you get a little calendar, well, you know it is. And I'm in the same boat. My wife tells me, we're out of salt. Do I have to call somebody? But, it's one of those things that you don't, unless you're out in Enfield, because the people out in Enfield, they'll go through a bag of salt every 3-4 days.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Holy.
Yeah. It's when the water's really hard, you're going through more salt. It's proportional. Okay?
It's not that bad.
No, obviously, if you're going through, if you're one of those people who forgets to put salt in, then it means that you're going through less than a bag a month. Because I can go down and put 6 bags in mine. I'm good for over 6 months. Then I forget about it. Except for, thank God, I put one of those little reminders in my phone.
Yes.
And then it brings me to go get salt. And I always kind of watch the sales. You see a flyer come out and salt's on special somewhere for $3.99. Well, go buy it because it's going to be back up at $6 or $7. And salt right now is a loss leader for most retailers. They're selling it at cost or below. I stopped selling salt. I can't make money at it. I buy salt at almost $5 or $6 a bag. And then I got to pay shipping on top of that, and then I got to store it, and I got to have a forklift to deal with it. I got rid of it. Customers got to buy salt anyway. Why do I have to have salt? When I put a new unit in, I don't need to put salt in it because the unit's already charged up. It's already going to work for 2 to 3 weeks before salt's added to it because the salt is not working from your salt tank. The salt is sucked from your salt tank and it stores like electricity into a rechargeable battery. You're storing that energy in your water conditioner. So once the energy is there and stored, you can use it over the next few weeks. So when I put a new unit in, they've got weeks before they have to have more salt added to their hopper to recharge their battery, so to speak. So for the most part, salt for me, I was losing money. And not to mention my vehicles. I mean, when we first started in industry, I was, taking 10 bags of salt out every day. When the truck went out of the driveway, it was loaded with salt. Well, geez, the first repair bill for all the shocks and springs and tires and things, I lost every penny that I ever thought about making off the salt was gone. So, and people don't understand when I tell them it's $12 a bag. It's not worth it. So we just sort of washed our hands and said, okay, well, we're not salt retailers. We're installation service people, and we have older customers who, yes, can't carry salt, and we do in fact go and buy salt for those guys. But Canadian Tire sells it cheaper than I can buy it from Sifto Direct. It's a loss leader for them. I'm paying $5. I can go down there and buy it. I mean, for $5 a bag. Why would I order a truckload in at a couple $1,000 plus all the storage place? And we just looked at the numbers and said, well, what are we doing here? We're doing all this work for free. So now it's only our select clientele that can't do the work and absolutely have to have it, don't have any relatives in the area, don't have any young guys next door that they can tap on the shoulder and say, here's $100, go down and buy me a year's worth of salt and bring it back home for me. That would be a wonderful thing, but not everybody has that. So anyway, yeah. So hardness, back to that, most waters have a certain amount of hardness in them. All waters have a certain amount of hardness in them. As soon as it comes down as rain, which is perfectly soft water, by the way, as soon as it hits the ground, hardness is imparted into the water. So any kind of a dug well, drilled well, doesn't matter, unless you're gathering a cistern, which is collecting the rainwater right off the roof and putting it into a holding tank. You're not going to get any calcium in that water because it hasn't come in contact with it. But that's a whole nother can of worms that, when you have a cistern, you got problems with bacteria, you got problems with the roof. I just met a customer out in Peggy's Cove, and the guy looked at me and he goes, oh, we're just going to put a cistern in. I said, okay, here's your problems. And he couldn't believe the list of things because I said, what about that bird that just flew by? That's going to drop a load on your roof. That's going to end up going down into your holding tank, and you're going to drink that water?
Yummy.
Exactly. But I mean, all of these things in perspective, you can treat it, right? As long as you got it. What I do when I install a cistern for a customer is I put a filter in off the roof. we have these big, they look like rain barrels, so they're aesthetically pleasing outside the yard, but we tie all the rain gutters in and they go through that, and all of that bird, for the most part, is filtered out. And then the filter media, you can, on a nice summer day, you stretch it out and just wash it off and roll it back up and stuff it in there. And it removes, for the most part, the bulk of what the problem would be as far as that bird slash insect, anything that's alive that's on the roof is going to be in the water. And I mean, I've gone out to customers' houses that have cisterns, and you turn off all the lights in the room and you go, okay, you ready for this? And then you take a flashlight and you shine it into the tank and things will swim away.
Oh.
Right? That's what's happening. Microbiology will find a way, especially in a place like that where you got the input of fresh water, you got all that nice dark area for these things to grow and multiply. So UV light, you have to have UV lights and you have to have proper filters to take that out, but after you do that, it's no problem.
There's a system, I know this is
Yeah?
and when you put the last one, the water.
3 tanks, but the 3 processes there you're talking about, right? 3 tanks. So what are the processes and why are they there?
Everything is
Yeah. Biobeads. Yeah. There's a reaction that you're causing with those, but with every water, why are you doing that? There's some reason, like when you look at a water test, you go, okay, well, that's the problem. What's the solution? But not every solution is going to be the same. So the 3 tanks that you're talking about for that particular location may not work for someone else because the chemistry doesn't fall to say that's what we need. So that's where water gets complicated. You can't just go, oh, my reflex is I'm just going to go buy that water conditioner. It's $1,000, walk away. You're not going to be able to walk away on most of the jobs because that $1,000 machine's not going to work. You might have to go to a $5,000 machine. And I've seen it. I've seen the real estate deals on the water are the ones to be careful of, especially on salt water on the ocean. Because if you get down into that water table that happens to bring the salt water in from outside, what are you going to do? You got salt water now. Well, reverse osmosis is the only way of separating that sodium, and now you're talking whole house reverse osmosis. But luckily, you're on the ocean, no lack of water. So you have all kinds of water to produce your new water with. That's not a problem as long as you have, reverse osmosis is a beautiful way to produce water. But if you're an ocean-going ship, you got no shortage of water. But if you're on a well in the middle of an area, you might turn your reverse osmosis system on, it runs for an hour, and you're out of water. What are you going to do?
From Montreal. Can we take the water from the ocean? There's a
Yep. Yep.
Can you repeat his question just because if one's online, can't hear the audience, they can only really hear you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So far it's been okay, but this one they wouldn't.
Yeah. So your question was that.
If it's possible to just go take the water from the ocean.
Yeah, water from ocean-going ships and houses near the ocean have absolutely no problems putting in a reverse osmosis system. Half of the cruise ships you go on have a reverse osmosis system on board. They can't go along and wait for water from one port to another, so they have production units on board. So it's the same.
You mean if you have a house.
If you have a house, yeah, but it's the same thing. If you live on the coast, you can throw. I've got guys up in Lunenburg. There's a whole street. The whole street's contaminated with salt water. We have reverse osmosis systems up and down the street.
Yeah, but it's legal.
It's legal.
As much water from the ocean as
You can put you can put a suction pump out there in the ocean and bring as much water in as your little heart desires. There's no law against bringing salt water in. A lot of guys will do it just, for saltwater pools and all kinds of other, applications. But yeah, we do quite a few of them around Nova Scotia where we're actually treating salt water. Now the salt water is either going to come in from a well that's got intrusion coming back from the ocean, or the customer said, well, why am I going to drill a well? Why don't I just throw a pump out in the ocean and bring it in? Either way, doesn't matter. But if you drill a well, the chances are that you've got a little bit of fresh water being mixed in with the salt water, and now you're not dealing with pure salt water, you're dealing with a brackish water. Brackish water is a lot cheaper to treat. A reverse osmosis system meant for pure salt ocean water is a $25,000 sale.
I think it's cheaper to drill the well.
Okay, yes, but a well drilled is 10. the water pump for that, and all of the work. By the time you're done with your well and all of that, you're barking at 25,000. So, and there's no guarantee, right? So in those cases, the real estate in that particular place out in Lunenburg, there's a sign there. And it just says basically that, you know, this street, if you choose to buy on here, there are no wells. It's all salt water being treated and purified.
Maybe I'm going off. What's the price involved in desalination?
That's what we're talking about.
Oh, okay.
Desalination is reverse osmosis. There's only two ways to desalinate. You're either going to reverse osmosis it, or you're going to boil it, evaporate the pure water that's coming up, and then recondense it into pure water. Now that's expensive. Try footing the bill for that. Now our ocean-going frigates used to have steam. We used to have steam ships basically. So water wasn't a problem because we always had steam being created by the ship to propel it, so we could steal the fresh water off of that. But now if you go look at our Navy frigates, none of them have steamers on there. They're all gas turbines. So where you get your water? Well, they have these, and in the Navy they call them RODS, which stands for reverse osmosis desalination. That's what the Navy guys, and they start talking RODS, but it's the same thing. It's just reverse osmosis is desalination if that's what the problem is. But reverse osmosis is not specific to just sodium. So you can use it for arsenic, you can use it for whatever. But every molecule that you're removing through reverse osmosis has a rejection percentage, depending on the size of that particular molecule. So sodium has a particular rejection rate. Uranium has a rejection rate, which is a lot higher, by the way, than arsenic. If you have arsenic, reverse osmosis is only about a 70 to 80% removal. But sodium, 98, 99. Uranium, 99. So you have to understand which mineral it is that you're trying to remove, what the percentage of rejection will be, and then you can always add other processes in behind it. Like I've got arsenic alley is under my belt as well, and that's the Mineville area in Nova Scotia down on the way to Musquodoboit Harbor. There is arsenic in there to the tune of 1,500 on a lot of houses. The acceptable guideline is 10. So if I put a reverse osmosis system in there and I take out 70 to 80%, I'm still got a miserable fail on my hands. Now, the reverse osmosis is still one of the treatment tools that we have. After I take 70 to 80% of it out, I can apply another tool. Now, one of those tools might be, there's some different products now available. One is called Metsorb, another one's called AdEdge, and they absorb arsenic. So you put this filter in, and it takes arsenic out of the water. Problem is, arsenic doesn't come out of it. So you're throwing the thing away when it's full. Right? So the cost goes up. But if you can take 70% of it out by reverse osmosis, and you're only left with 30% or 20%, now your filter's taking care of that. You just reduce the cost of your arsenic removal by 70, 80% by having the reverse osmosis as your primary. Okay? And underneath kitchen sinks, we do that all the time for people. We install the reverse osmosis, which knocks that arsenic way down, and then we top it off with another stage, because typically your reverse osmosis systems you see under sinks are 5 stages. So stage 1, you've got 5 micron particles. Stage 2, you've got carbon chemical absorption. Stage 3, same thing. Stage 4 is your membrane, and then stage 5 is it's a little cleanup filter that's used, because once you produce the water and you put it into a little holding tank, and then 2 days later you come to get it out of there to drink it, it may not taste so good because it's been hanging around. So it's polished off by this last filter to make it taste good. Well, we turn it into a 6th stage by adding that extra Metsorb or arsenic cartridge in at the back, which is going to absolutely remove my arsenic down to 0. Now, reverse osmosis will, if the arsenic is formed properly, because remember, arsenic is just a very loose word for arsenite, arsenate, which is the AS3 and the AS5 of the world. Now, both of those are classified under the water tests that you get back from the lab. They don't break it down to AS3 and AS5. They just tell you you have arsenic. So we don't know. As me, I'm walking in the door going, oh, so we got 1,000 count of arsenic. Okay, what's the breakdown? If it was all in one form, I have a system I could apply to it, and it'll take 100% of it out. but it won't take it out if it's the other form. So I'm going to be left with a failure of a certain amount of arsenic in my water. That's where you use this dual media, because the metsorbs and adedges do not miss one. They absorb them both. Now, if you're going to use that for your whole house, that can be very expensive, because the fact that you are throwing it away, it's a $2,000 change. If you're doing that every 2 years, that's $1,000 a year to maintain your water in your house. And remember, 3% of the water that comes in from any tap, whether you're on city water, country water, or well, whatever, only 3% of the water coming into the house is used for consumption. The rest of it's thrown away. You flush it down toilets, goes down your shower, goes through your laundry machine. 3% of the water is actually used in your cooking and consumption. So how much money do you want to spend on 3% of your water? Right? That's where the little reverse osmosis systems really give you that bang for the buck, because all of a sudden you can put in a little reverse osmosis system, and as long as you can shower, arsenic does not go through your skin. So you can stand in the shower, you can soak in the bathtub with arsenic in your water, you're not going to affect your life. But drink it, cook with it, you're going to affect your life. Now, how much is going to affect your life? Well, you want to ask me, if I had the question of, did I want to live on a water that contained arsenic, and I'm not going to be able to treat it, or a water that contained chlorine, and I'm not going to be able to treat it, which one do you think I'd choose? Yep, why? You can get rid of chlorine too. But without treating it, chlorine does go through your skin. Chlorine does not stay in the water. It's a gas. That's why when you go into a restroom or something where there's chlorinated water, you can smell it, because chlorine is a gas. Chlorine is not a liquid. They liquefy it for the purpose of treating your water, but it's still a liquid. It's still a gas. So when you're standing in the shower, it gases off because of your hot water. You're inhaling it. Boom, you got it in your lungs. You got it through your skin, and then lo and behold, you get out of the shower and you had a drink. 3 ways you got it in your body. Arsenic can only get it one way, and you have to consume it.
So is there a system for taking chlorine out of the whole house?
Yep. Yep. Dechlorination is basically a Brita water filter.
For the whole house, though?
For the whole house. Basically, it's a large version of a Brita water filter. And Brita water filters, if you're living on a well and you're using one, bad. Bad. It is a dechlorination device. It is not meant for non-chlorinated waters, because the chlorine is actually killing the bacteria that imparts in your filter. So if you do not have the chlorine when you add your new fresh water to kill the bacteria that's in your Brita filter, you're actually increasing bacteria levels massively in your drinking water. Coliform E. coli. E. coli will grow. E. coli...
In the filter?
No, it's in your life. It's in your kitchen. And it takes over because your mouth is loaded with coliform. And if you're standing there talking to somebody while you're filling your Brita up, you're spewing coliform into the air, which are going down, settling into your filter, and there's nothing there to kill them. And carbon, which is what activated carbon is what a Brita water filter is the absolute best place for bacteria to grow and multiply. Everything that they need for their life is in there, and they will take it over. So to the point where you can't, I mean, if you test that water, it would fail miserably coming out of your Brita. So
what about filters in a
Yep.
Is a filter on a fridge for the water?
Well, again, filters for refrigerators, things like that,
On well,
are not airborne.
so they're okay.
Right. Which is why a lot of people will tell you that, you know, water from a tap is safer than water from a lot of other sources, water coolers especially, because water coolers are even more susceptible to airborne bacteria. Most people don't even realize it, but they pull the top off the water, they pull the bottle off, and they look in there, and there's stuff growing in there. Because you got all the elements. You got light. Most people don't put a jug over top or a container over top of their water jug, so sunlight hits it. You got air in the tank because water came out, so air went in to replace the water, and you got water. What else do you need to make things grow, right? Water coolers are known. They're 2,000 times more capable of maintaining a bacteria count. So if you have a water cooler, you better be cleaning it out on a regular basis if you're adding jugs of water. We sell water coolers that are closed off. You don't put a water bottle on them. You put a water treatment system in, and then you send the water to them, same as your refrigerator, where air can't get in. As long as air can't get in, then your chances of contamination through bacterial are next to nothing. But yeah, that's a good question. Chlorine is a very useful tool. Try and get water to massive amounts of people through an underground distribution system without having a massive bacterial distribution, not to mention viruses, cyst spores, everything else that chlorine kills. So it's a great tool. But in the future, I think you're going to have warning labels that basically tell you, remove that chlorine before you drink it, people, or use it. You can put a dechlorinator in your house. You're done.
What would be an average, and I know you can't completely, but what would the average cost for someone on chlorinated water to have that system?
Whole house, you're looking at about $1,100, $1,200, depending on the application, right? I mean, I walk in the door, I look at it and go, okay, that's going to cost me a lot more to install than one that's easier over here. But in the ballpark of $1,000 to $1,500, and you got dechlorination
For the whole house?
for the whole house.
Okay.
You can do it cheaper if you don't want long term. If you want a shorter term whole house solution, you can put a filter in, like a replaceable cartridge filter. It might last you 6 months. Still going to do the same job for 6 months, but it's not going to last for 4 years, 5 years.
You just have to keep it.
Yep. And the crap that also comes in would scare you. How many people looked in the back of a city water toilet? There's crap back there. That's all coming in with your water. Yes, because the water tank sits there, things settle out, you get a lot of crap at the bottom of the back of your toilet. You don't even realize that that's coming in with the water. And if you're not filtering that out of your drinking water, that's what you're drinking. But it's all, like, it's not dangerous stuff. It's just, like, not appetizing. You look at it, all this black crap sitting in the back of the toilet, and you go, ooh, yeah, I'm drinking that too. But, a nice little reverse osmosis system will take that out. And that's where refrigerators with the little carbon filter come in, because it's a closed system, so air can't get in. As long as the water is under pressure, bacteria can't get in, because if there was a hole for bacteria to get in, water would be spraying out. So it's a nice little tool to have to dechlorinate, I guess, the refrigerator filters. But that doesn't help you in your shower. And that's where you're getting a lot of your damages in your shower. Now, you can, if you don't want to spend that kind of money, go, I know online, there's lots of filter places that you can buy a shower filter. You take your filter head down, you can screw this new one up, and now you have a dechlorinating shower head. Okay, again, you got filters in there that you got to replace all the time, but you go from a well water to a city water, and it's staggering, the difference. And if you're not used to the chlorine, your eyes, you get out of the shower, your eyes will be buggy red because of the chlorine gases coming up into your face. It's just not an application where you feel comfortable once you know the difference. But if you don't know the difference, you're oblivious. You get in and out of the shower, you're used to it, you hardly even notice it, and you think, oh, that's nice, clean smell. But it's not really healthy. Chlorine's a carcinogen. So is arsenic. So they're both cancer-causing if they are built up in your system. One application or one exposure to arsenic is not going to kill you or send you to the hospital. Same with chlorine. Neither one of them are a single, I just did myself, I'm going to call 911 and head to the hospital. You're talking about, especially in arsenic, the drinking water guideline is 10 micrograms per liter, and it's based on drinking 1.5 liters of water a day for 25 years. At the end of that 25 years, you could have bioaccumulated arsenic in your body. Now you're at risk because of that to develop cancer. Same thing with chlorine. If you go online and look up chlorine in city water drinking systems, you're going to find there's reports of people getting sick and dying every day from liver, lung, skin, all kinds of complications for chlorine in the water. But Canada and all kinds of other national governments go, well, if we put chlorine in our water, we're going to save 100,000 citizens a year. But we're going to kill 5,000. We still saved 95,000. So it's a wonderful thing. But why don't they go one step further and say, by the way, people, you might want to take that chlorine out of your water when it gets to your house. That way your health is much more in tune. All right, so anybody got any questions so far?
Smell.
In your city water? Yeah, right now it's not so bad. Go in another month or two, and the chlorine levels start to go up and up and up. So the warmer the water, the higher the chlorine level has to be in order to maintain the kill, right? So it's all about, with chlorine, it's about contact time and level in order to kill. So in the summertime, all of our water pipes, for access reasons, are buried underneath our roads. How many times have you walked on an asphalt road in the summertime and not burned your feet? And our water pipes are right below it, so it heats up the water. Try and get a cold glass of water out of a city water supply in the summer. It's coming out cool, but not cold.
So is that why, so?
Yep. It's the same rule.
Repeat that
Yeah,
statement.
yeah. And the thing was, the question was why when you go south, you know, the chlorine levels are higher, and it's the same story. The higher the temperature of the water, the more chlorine you're going to have to hit it with. Now, right now, the last time I tested the city water, it was running about 0.4, 0.5 parts per million of chlorine. In the summer, it'll be up to 1.5. Yeah, it is. And it'll slowly creep up. And then as soon as the fall starts to hit, it'll slowly taper back down again to their winter rate. It's chlorine. It has a purpose. They need to put it into the water. But in the summertime, you can almost bleach your hair just standing in the shower. It's that high. So, but arsenic, none of those concerns. Now, with that being said, because most of you guys are dealing with city water applications, right? You guys are well?
We're from the valley. So
You're from the valley?
A combination of both.
Combination of both.
But I would say that probably 60 to 70%.
Okay.
But it's very good information for chlorine because now they are selling something that's going to down water. I'm going to highly suggest that having chlorine.
For what it's worth, what it costs. You look at the cost of a house and the fact you're spending how much of your time in there, why not treat that water and make it, you know. You talk to people who have taken the chlorine out and they go, my God, I didn't realize it was that much of an impact. And then they go, I don't know why I didn't do this years ago. They didn't know, right? Knowledge is king. While we're on that topic of city water though, if you are selling older properties, you may want to get a nice water test done, even if it's on the city, because there are a couple of things you want to look at. Asbestos is one. Concrete used to contain asbestos. If there are old concrete water pipes feeding underground to your old house, you could have asbestos in your water. You can have lead because of the lead content that used to be in some of the old pipes that were in city water applications. You can have lead. So the older the homes on old water distribution systems, the more the need to address a safe water concern and get some testing done. Heads up, I guess, is all I can tell you. You know, most people don't, if you don't look after it and advise your clients, hey, this could be a problem because that house was built back in, you know, the early 1900s. Well, who knows what was happening back then? It could have been some of this asbestos concrete that's somehow the water's passing through, coming in contact with it, and now all of a sudden you got asbestos in your water and they never tested for it. So who knew?
First I've heard.
Yeah.
Best thing is wine.
Yes.
The best thing is what?
Wine.
Wine, yes, absolutely, yes.
Drink wine.
Yeah, wine or beer. Beer. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's with a group of women. He knew wine was right.
Oh, there you go. There you go. So anyway, yeah, any questions on that? I don't see anybody.
No, I've been watching.
Okay. So I guess colors. Discoloration and staining, I guess, is the next real quick topic. Colors in city water obviously are, it's lake water and they've treated it so you don't really get too much color, but all water contains color, some color. You can contain, if you had an absolutely pure water, which by the way you can't drink, pure water is too pure. All water has to have, that you use for your consumption, has to have a little something something in it. Otherwise, water is nature's perfect solvent. It wants to dissolve things into it. which is why the world works, because rain falls from the sky, it dissolves it here, it rolls it down the mountain, and it deposits it over there, and that's how the whole Earth cycle works. But water, being the absolute perfect solvent that it is, it's not specific to anything. You name something right now that water will not dissolve, and I'll applaud you. There's nothing. Oil, it'll go in. Dirt, it'll go in. It'll dissolve it. Arsenic, uranium, lead, calcium, whatever. Water will dissolve pretty much anything given enough time and contact space. And, you know, so if water is going to have that kind of an impact, imagine what happens when you drink it. You drink pure water, you urinate out all your minerals. You're urinating, you got this beautiful diet trying to get all these things into your body, and then you drink this too pure of a water. Now, reverse osmosis isn't too pure, so let's cross that bridge before we get there. But if you were to take water and make it absolutely H2O, nothing else, and then drink that, number one, there's nothing to taste. So you're just going to be drinking water, and it's just going to go in, it's going to steal minerals from you, and the more pure the water is, the more aggressive it is to do that. So all of a sudden you're taking water and really cleaning yourself out. And that's fine if you're trying to detox yourself or do something like that, but for the most part, you're trying to get a nice, healthy water to drink and get your minerals in your food. But try not to have your water clean your minerals out, which is why you don't want, you know, pure. Stuff that comes out of the space shuttle exhaust is not what you want to drink. It's just too pure. But again, water is the perfect solvent, and there is nothing that water will not dissolve. You can put a penny in pure water and it'll eat it up like crazy. Just like Coke and Pepsi, it'll just chew it right up. Now you have to keep freshening the water, because once you put the water into the penny, or the penny into the water, it's eventually going to get to the point where the copper levels are high in the water and it can no longer take any more out. So you freshen that up, you put more pure water back in, it'll just keep eating that copper penny till it's gone. Water, gotta love it. Keeps me busy. So smells, you can also get a lot of different odors and things like that coming in water. Chlorine is one in city water. But in our lakes and streams, we have had some pretty interesting summers in the past, especially up in the Fall River area. There have been some green waters coming out of taps just filled with algae spores, and just massive organic-y smells coming out of water. I mean, people are calling me up and I'm going in the house going, so this is city water? And it smells like that? And they go, yeah, it just started. So, well, obviously they're not going to spend a lot of money because it's a city water application. So I kind of steer them back to the city to get them to rectify the issue, right? Because if you're paying for water from the city, you're not going to pay me to fix the city water unless you want the chlorine out, which we do for a lot of people. I have one lady, my God, she calls me every 6 months and says, it's time to do my filter. I said, okay, no problem. So we go in and we change your filter for her. But I showed up one day and she answered the door. The side of her face was red. The chlorine was hitting her face and turned her red. So she knows when the chlorine's back in her water. Now, she was a public health nurse, and she used a spray bottle of chlorine on every patient coming through the door to clean that bed. She got to a point where she was so sensitive to chlorine that she can't even be near it now. And that's what the world is coming to. We're all sort of getting hypersensitive to this, and they're looking for a substitute for chlorine now, but they haven't found one that's going to take its place. Think about the swimming pools. You know how many of our Olympic swimmers have lung cancer in their later years? Where do you think chlorine sits in the pool? Right on top of the water, about that deep. And then the swimmer's going, and he's just taking in pure chlorine right off the top of the water. So Olympic swimming pools, that's been a talk, I know, to try and get the chlorine levels down to a much safer level for, you know, intense athletes to be hauling in massive amounts of air while they're in their workout. And, you know, chlorine's a nasty little thing, but like I said, it's got its purpose, and as long as you understand it, if you buy a city water house and you want to take the chlorine out of the water, call. Anything can be done. So back to the smell thing. Hydrogen sulfide is the most common smell that comes in on wells. It's caused by bacteria, believe it or not. Deep down in the earth, the bacteria is biodegrading the different organic, rotting, decaying leaves, vegetation, things like that. And the byproduct of them bacteria living there is the hydrogen sulfide gas, which is their poop, so to speak. So all of a sudden you go into a house and you got this huge, odor that comes up as soon as you turn the taps on. Well, especially if the house is not occupied, you're going to have a buildup of that gas. So if you live in a house and you go away for a week's vacation, you come home, your water smells. Well, what the heck happened? Well, the gases are traveling through the water. Even though your water shut off, the gases are still traveling through it. So they're going to go up and sit in the high points of the house. You turn on your tap in your upstairs bathroom, it's like, oh, Jesus, what happened here? Just lack of use and the gas is building up. Now, it can also get to the point where the gases are just so overpowering in the well that it doesn't matter. You don't have to shut the water off and go away for a week. You can shut the water off for 15 minutes and come back and it's got the smell. It's easy to fix. It's just basically oxygenating the water to knock that hydrogen sulfide out of the water and absorb it into the air. That's how we remove the smell. We add air to the water. The oxygen absorbs the hydrogen sulfide. The hydrogen sulfide is then collected in a machine and vented off. Boom, smell's gone, never comes out your taps. But you have to have the treatment system for it, or chlorinate the water. That'll knock the smell out too, but then you get the chlorine problem again. Air is the cheaper way to go.
Health-wise, though,
No
issue
it
with that?
if you can smell hydrogen sulfide, no issue. In the petroleum business, the hydrogen sulfide levels get so high, it's actually going to kill you if you're in a confined space with it, but you can't smell it. It goes from a smell threshold to a non-smelling threshold, and that's where you're going to get hurt. If you're in that confined space and you're breathing in those hydrogen sulfide fumes, you're not going to last long. You're not. But anytime you can smell it, and I've never ever in 25 years come up against a residential hydrogen sulfide smell that was strong enough to do harm. You're talking about it being an inconvenience, really. We're not anywhere near the petroleum levels of hydrogen sulfide in a residential application. But still, yeah, it is unhealthy if the level is high enough. Now, with that being said, if you're asthmatic, you're not going to have very much fun standing in a shower with hydrogen sulfide either. It's just, make you cough and choke, and you're not going to be doing well at all. So hydrogen sulfide is easy to remove. Just got to have the tools. Tools are air going in, collection of the air with the gas, and venting it off. Now, you got iron in your water, and you throw oxygen into the water, you're creating another problem. You're going to rust your water. So all of these things have to be taken into consideration, which is why guys like me go out and go, how much iron do we have? How much calcium do we have? How much hydrogen sulfide do we have? We build a picture of what we got to deal with first. Then I apply what I think is going to solve the problems one step at a time. So that's why if you call 10 different water people, you're going to get 10 different opinions. Not to mention 10 different companies all have 10 different systems for removing the problem. So each one of them might have collateral things that they do. Hydrogen sulfide systems can also remove a little bit of ferric iron from the water. So if you have low iron, hydrogen sulfide, you can put one system in, doesn't use salt by the way, uses oxygen, so you don't have to buy salt for that machine, you just put it in, tune up the little air device, and your system continually works. But it won't soften the water. It will remove limited amounts of iron because you're depending on the water to rust the iron. That way you can filter it out. Iron comes in two states for the most part, rust and clear iron, in layman's terms for you, or ferric iron and ferrous iron. If you have ferrous iron in your water, it's like taking a spoonful of sugar and adding it to water. All of a sudden that sugar is invisible. Try and get your sugar back out of that water. You're not going to do a very good job of getting that back out of the water until you evaporate all that water, and then you're left with your sugar sitting at the bottom of your pot. You're not going to get it back. But that sugar in that water obviously is, a large part of getting the iron in the same, that's what I was driving after, the iron in the same state. So when you have iron in that dissolved state, you have to have a water conditioner, water softener to remove those ions because they're in the dissolved state. You're not going to be able to filter them out. You can take that sugar and water and put it through a filter. A coffee filter is one of the finest filters money can buy you. Put your sugared water through there. You didn't get your sugar back, right? Same with iron in that state. You can put all the iron through that filter you want. It's part of the water. It is going right through that filter. But if you take that water, put it on the counter and let oxygen at it, you're going to cause the water to rust the iron from iron into rust. Now you can filter it. But for that system that uses the air to remove the hydrogen sulfide, to remove the iron, boy, you got to have a lot of time on your hands in order for that water to rust before the filter can take it out. So it's a slower process of removing iron, but it's sort of a free way of removing iron in the sense that you don't have to buy bags of salt for it. You just put in the system, the oxygen and generates it, rusts the water, and the hydrogen sulfide become part of the oxygen, and then boom, you're just filtering out the whole mess. So it's a pretty, and that's a play on words. A lot of water treatment companies will call it chemical-free water treatment. It's not chemical-free. It's a free chemical. You're using oxygen, and so far oxygen is still free, but it's still using something to power the process. In a water softener, you're buying the salt. Salt powers the process. In the oxygen systems, it's the oxygen that's powering the process. So you can remove the smell and you can remove a little bit of iron that way, but that's really all those oxygen generating systems are going to remove. You're not going to get too much. But they also do a number on arsenic. You can form arsenic 3 into arsenic 5 by adding the oxygen to the water, and in essence you're rusting the arsenic. You're changing its state. When you change its state, now the reverse osmosis system has a better crack at it. So you have all these tools in your bag for, there's so many different things that you got to know when you're going into a customer's house as to what your best application will be. What are you trying to do? What do you got tools-wise? And then from there you apply your little, go ahead. You're applying whatever you need, right? You pick up all the tools and you look at what you got to deal with, and then you go from there. So the rust and metallic tastes in the water, I guess we've pretty much ran through that one, and then the chlorine taste, I pretty much ran through that one. So I guess we can flip the page over on that and go into the health issues, which I just talked to you about the asbestos in the old concrete pipes and stuff. And then the cysts and bacteria and viruses are also waterborne. So UV lights, by the way, take care of all of that. Anything alive in the water is what a UV or ultraviolet light's going to do for you. Ultraviolet lights are a beautiful tool in my business because they don't cost chlorine to take care of the problem. And the good news there is if you're living on a well and septic, you can't have chlorine. If you put chlorine into a septic tank, you're going to kill it. You're stopping your bioactivity from biodegrading all of the waste matter coming from your house. You're going to ruin your septic.
Question.
Sure.
You live on well water or town water?
I live on well water.
Do you have a UV light?
No. I have a drilled well.
Yes, I have drilled well too.
Yep.
But I've often wondered, because even though I lecture my clients that they should have their water tested at least yearly, I don't remember to do it myself sometimes, and water changes.
Yep.
And I just wonder sometimes if a person should have both.
Well,
Or should have a UV on a well.
if you...
There's never been a problem.
No. If you have a dug well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the entire Earth's surface, the soil for the first 6 feet is laden with bacteria. Viruses, cyst spores, it's all in that first 6 feet of the soil around the Earth. Dug wells are just a hole in that water, in that soil. And the water comes down as rain, hits that soil, goes and percolates into your well, and it carries all those cyst spores, viruses, and bacteria into your well. So if you have a dug well, you might pass it on one day because some dug wells are spring-fed, which means the water's coming up from deep underground. And bacteria are only in that first 6 feet of soil. So you don't have to worry about a drilled well, which that piece of steel that you see sticking out of the ground goes right down into the bedrock. That's the way a drilled well is fixed or installed. They drill a hole in the ground that goes right down into the bedrock, and they pound that piece of steel into that hole. Now, if they do nothing else, you got a dry hole. There's no water coming in because there's no fractures for the water to enter into. They got a dry hole with that piece of steel, keeping all that overburdened soil and water in that soil away. Now you go into the lower water table, which is the aquifers. And the aquifers are easily seen. If you're driving down the highway and you look at where the roads are cut through the rock, and you see the cracks in the rock and the water percolating through, well, that's an aquifer. So your well is basically a hole drilled down through those layers of rock, and it encounters these fractures, and the water pours into your well through those rocks. But that's too deep for bacteria to survive for the most part. There are exceptions to the rule, which is why you want to test it. But for the most part, drilled wells do not contain any organic matter if the well is properly produced. But you can have fractures in the rock that go from the surface down below where the casing is in the well, allowing the water to fast track from the surface down into the well below the casing. Now, part of our job every day is to go out and fix these kinds of problems if we find them. But the well drillers don't know that when they put the well in. They go, okay, the rules are you have to have 10 feet of casing into the bedrock. So they drill, when they hit the bedrock, the well driller knows he's gone from loose soil to hard rock because the well, that's what they do. They know their machine, right? So they drill down 10 feet and then they drive that piece of steel in. Now you got a dry hole. Now they put a smaller drill bit in and they drill you a hole inside of your dry hole. That's your well. Okay? The more of these fractures they encounter add up to how much water you're getting. Minimum, and there's a ratio that CMHC has for how deep the well has to be and the input of how much water is coming in at that depth. It's a ratio. If you've got a 300-foot well, you can survive off a half a gallon a minute. But if you've got a 10-foot well, you are not going to survive off a half a gallon a minute. So it's a ratio of how deep to how much, and it's all about the storage. For the most part, the rule is, or the goal is, to have enough water in the well to satisfy the day's needs when the customer wakes up in the morning. Average 50 gallons of water per person per day. 4 people in the house, you're looking for 200 gallons of water per day roughly. If your well contains 200 gallons of water before you wake up, you've obviously got your water. It's got 24 hours to reproduce that 200 gallons of water. If it's coming in at a gallon a minute, there's 1,440 minutes in a day. You're going to have 1,440 gallons of water coming into your well. That's more than your 200 gallons of water needed for the day. So it's a ratio of what's there, how deep it is, how much water's coming in. And yes, there's some pretty sketchy ones out there where your customers are dealing with 1/8 of a gallon of water in a 300-foot well. And the problem is static water level. You ever hear that term before? If you drill a hole in the ground or a dug well or anything and you don't touch the water, water's going to rise in that water column to a certain level. That's your static water level. Okay? Wherever it reaches with no consumption, that's static. After you start to use water, it's going to pull that down, but eventually it'll come back up to its static level. If you have a drilled well that's 300 feet and the static water level is 250 feet from the top, you only got 50 feet of water there. It's never going to rise above that because the static water level is 250 feet from the bottom or from the surface. What do? Well, you tank the water in the house. Say they got a gallon a minute, but it's only got 50 gallons or 50 feet of water. Well, a gallon a minute, it's still that shallow well. Even though it's deep down in the ground, you don't have the storage because the water's not coming into the well. And you don't have enough water because it's only coming in at a gallon a minute. So we put tanks in the house. And then you pump the water in, you put it in the tanks. Well fills back up in the well, you pump it back into the house, so you're constantly kind of trickling water in. And, if you're listing a house and you've had Dean Walker or somebody come out and do that flow test on your well, and all of a sudden your whole real estate deal changes because you're talking about no water. And the ratio has to be there. And you got one guy living in the house or 2 people living in the house and you got a family of 5 moving in, it's not going to work. Right? And the people living in the house go, we've never ran out of water. What's the problem? And they sign off on the disclosure, and then the new people move in and they're out of water. So it's always a good idea to try and get the well report, if you can, and that'll tell you what the flow rate on the well was when it was drilled by the driller. And that gives you a little bit of information whether or not you got to panic a little bit more or not. Right?
Thank you, man. Just want to be sure what you say. If you have a well,
Has to be.
has to be mandatory. Some area every month. You don't have to do that.
Department of Environment recommends you test your water 4 times a year. That's a little excessive for me, right? Especially if you're listing somebody's house and they have done no testing, obviously get it tested. But you want to get a history of the well over a 12-month period, at the very least, before you relax your testing. So you go in, you do a spring, summer, winter, and fall water analysis. You put all 4 on the table and you go, look, no changes. But if you go, look, oh my God, it's changing. And then that's telling you, don't stop testing there. You're going to want to test it a little bit more often until you find out what's going on there, if it's a seasonal thing, because arsenic can come and go. I've had people have high arsenic levels through the roof in the summer, but in the winter there's nothing because the ground froze and it froze off. Whatever it was that was feeding that arsenic into the well has been sealed off.
I know someone, but it is, it's
Yep.
every few months.
Yeah.
If they don't go, the province just can close the well, and that's all.
Prudency would say to test it, and then once you get steady, regular numbers, you can back off a little bit. I don't recommend you ever stop testing your well completely. But once you get at least that history done with a 12-month, and I tell people when they're moving in, if they did a test when you first move in, obviously it's going to be done for the transaction, but then 6 months after that, do it again, and then maybe another 9 months after that, so that you're starting to throw the seasons into it. But at least get, in the first 2 years, at least get the 4 water tests done. Then after that, it's up to you. If you want to, go, oh, well, I didn't have any changes, so I'm going to back off and I won't test it for another 3, 4, 5 years. That's totally up to you as an educated decision. But don't educate it on like, oh, I'm too lazy to go do that water test right now. Nah, I'll do it another day. No, take the time, get it done, get your numbers in line, sit down and make an educated decision whether or not you want more testing or less testing. But then after that, you can do a little bit of, coliform testing is real easy to do, and that's, to be honest with you, not, in my opinion, as scary as some of the other things that you might want to test for, like arsenic. We've got a question. Shelley, for tests for buyers, how many sellers are going to have this information? Very few. That's the problem. Yeah. Nobody really, if you look at Department of Environment's website, it is on there, but it doesn't necessarily get handed off to the homeowners in the right way. And yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement, but people consider it to be, and water testing is not cheap. A budget homeowner package, which is the very minimum that I would recommend that you get done, which is only going to include your arsenic, uranium, and your coliform and E. coli, that's coming in at $105 at the lab. So you want to do that 4 times a year, there's almost $500 gone, plus the time and effort to come and get it if you're doing it yourself. If you're going to get someone like me to do it, well, I'm pretty inexpensive. I charge $40 on top of whatever you want tested. So if you want to get a $500 water test done through me, you're going to spend $540. But I'm charging you $40 to come out to the property, take the water samples, and take them to the lab. And then hopefully, if something comes up out of that, we're going to talk about the fix. So for me, it's a service. But what about the homeowner? If you're going to do it yourself, great. If you're not, you're going to be paying somebody, and they're not probably going to do it for $40. So most places are going to come in, the guy coming to do the water sample is going to get $100 out of you, plus the water sample. And if you want to do a more comprehensive one, like this test right here that I've got is a standard water analysis, that's going to cost you $300 plus my $40. So $340, that's not bad, but when you look at the information you get, there's pages of it. It goes from A to Z on your metals. It starts off at antimony, goes all the way to zinc. Gives you all the organic contents, gives you the coliform E. coli, gives you total dissolved solids, gives you so much information you can just read down and go, oh. But if you don't get at least one of them done, you can never have a history to refer back to. Now, with that being said, the history, when you buy a house or you're talking to people that are buying and selling houses, you should tell them to set up a well log right away. And a well log is going to include the well report from the driller. It's going to include the pump report from the pump installation guide telling you what pump is it down that well, how deep it is. It's going to also include any water testing that you've done and in the past and in the future. And if you were to list the house and on an open house have that little binder sitting on the counter with all that information in there, my God, imagine what you as a real estate agent, you're walking in the door and there's a well log. And you can open it up and go, look, the reports of all the tests are here from the back history, and oh, look, they had that problem, but look, they fixed it because right behind it, there's the receipt for what they did to fix the problem. That is going to be a requirement in the future. The well log, it's my opinion to set up a well log that includes the well drilling report.
Hey, can you get that online?
For the most part, yes. And if not, most wells have a tag on the top of them as to who drilled it. Contact that company. They should have the records. We keep all the records. We get calls from customers all the time saying, I can't remember, how deep is my well? We just pull up the file and we can tell you. Now in the future, but it's a manpower thing. I mean, the well drillers have been giving the reports to the Department of Environment for 20 years.
Is it at that department? Okay.
Yeah, but they're not online.
Oh,
Because they've got nobody to sit down and put all the data into the site. So it's there in big piles sitting in somebody's office in Department of Environment, but it's not all up online yet. However, Blue Nose Well Drilling, us, we have all of our files computerized, so we can just go, there's your well report, here's what the information you're looking for. So, and yeah, back to that. So the well report, the pump report, subsequent water testing that you do going in, and any water testing after that should all be included in this log, and anything to do with water treatment, water pumps, water well. If you have that log, it is a wealth of confidence for somebody walking in the door to buy your property. And it just solves so many, questions.
That little reverse osmosis that you put in the kitchen,
Yes?
what price range are you looking at?
The reverse osmosis systems that go underneath the kitchen sink are $600 installed. That is minor compared to going out and buying water. Look at how much a jug of water costs. And then include your gas to go drive and get it, because inevitably you never have enough water on grocery day. You have to jump in the car and run down on a Friday night when company pops in and you got no water for tea. So now include your gas and your time and your effort. The little $600 device is peanuts.
And how long does it last?
It's made of plastic. So the components themselves, I've seen them, I've got them out there 20, 30 years old. Now the membranes are good for 3 to 5 years. The filter should be changed every year. So with your regular maintenance on your system, which should be done every year or less depending on your water. I got some people that they have to change their pre-filter to the RO every 6 months. It's an $8 pre-filter. So you change it once a year. But the membrane itself is what's doing the magic. And that membrane is good for 3 to 5 years, depending on whether it's been abused or not. And when I mean abuse, if you've got iron in your water, and you got a water conditioner, and you don't put salt in it, you're now abusing your reverse osmosis because the iron is heading straight into that. And iron is not what a reverse osmosis system is very good at removing. It will do it. But you're talking about a microscopic pore in a membrane, and you get a piece of iron that lays across that pore, it's done. No more water's going through that pore. The next pore plugs off, and the next one, the next thing you know, all your pores are plugged. Your membrane's not producing any water. You need a new one. That's $100. The reverse osmosis system, the pre-filters, all 4 of them that got to be changed every year come to $67 for the 4 filters. All 4 of them. So for that, you're protecting your $100 membrane, but you should still be replacing your membrane every 3 to 5 years, depending on the test. And we as professionals, when we go in to service your unit, we have these little meters that we stick in the water. And I basically turn your tap on, your main city or your main supply tap in your kitchen, cold water. I take a water sample, I put my little meter in it, and I get a number. Let's say that number is 1,000. Okay? Now I take the reverse osmosis water and I stick my little meter in it. I better not get 1,000 because I'm demineralizing the water with that reverse osmosis, and my little meter is reading the minerals in the water. Doesn't tell me what they are, and I don't really care what they are at that point. What I want to know is, do I have at least a 95% rejection of the minerals that are in the water? If I do, my membrane is still working perfectly. If I don't, I get a tear. It's like paper. These membranes are like paper. The water's percolating through the paper. If you get a tear, you got water racing through that's not being treated. So, you know, that's why you have to have a little bit of professional touch on them every now and then. I mean, I got some people that will do their own maintenance. They come into the shop and they buy their filters. They go home and they change their filters. Wonderful. It's better to do that than not to do it. But unless you got the TDS meter, and a lot of people have them because hot tub people have them for checking the conductivity on your hot tub or whatever. You can take it, you can bring it to me and I'll test it for you, no problem. You can take it into any hot tub store, they'll test it for you and tell you whether or not your membrane is, but you got to have the before and the after, right? Because if you've got a 10 count in your raw water, your reverse osmosis system is almost going to take you down to a 1 or 2. But if you got a 10,000 count, it's obviously, it's a proportional thing. It's only going to do so much percentage of whatever your water is.
And then also versus the unit for the whole house.
The reverse osmosis for the whole house? That's a tough question because it depends on the TDS, the total dissolved solids. If you've got a 40,000 TDS, which is what salt water is, you're going to need a lot more water pressure to separate the good water from the bad. Domestic ones, it's the little ones that go underneath the counters, they work off of domestic water pressure, 50, 60 PSI. A commercial reverse osmosis system for whole house, for salt water, runs at 750 PSI. That's warning label time. There's enough pressure there if some kid goes down with his little play hammer and starts hammering on the membrane housing under 750 PSI, that's explosive. So it's not something that you know, just kind of put down in the basement and then let the kids go down and play around. You really, you know, we put them in when we have those applications, we put them in rooms. We have rooms built around them for quiet because 750 PSI is like a pressure washer producing water. It's noisy.
Would be 5 years, one that got no electricity, no water. So that osmosis thing, but outside of the house.
Yeah, but of course around here you got freezing issues. So yeah, the unit's not going to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there's going to be a lot of downtime. So if you're going to buy something like that, and to answer your question, that particular unit's 25,000. But if you don't have that much of a problem, if you're say into a brackish water, well, you can cut that bill in half. Now you're talking 10, 15,000. And if it's not even brackish water, say it's just a high TDS but not salt water, maybe it's arsenic or maybe it's lead, maybe it's whatever. Maybe it's a water softening problem like out in Enfield where, and I've got one guy, he's got all the money in the world, he didn't really care. He said, I don't want that water in my house. He said, I got lots of water. Put a reverse osmosis system in here that's going to solve my problem. And his problem was that the water softener softened the water, put a little bit of salt into the water. So it was a $9,000 RO that solved his problem. And he's smiling. He's got perfect water coming out of all of his taps. But that's producing water at roughly a gallon of water per minute coming out of the RO. So you need 3 gallons a minute coming in from the well. You're going to throw 2 away, and you're going to keep 1. That's an awful lot of water that you're wasting. But on most of these applications that we're applying reverse osmosis to, you really don't care. You got lots of water. As long as you got lots of water, you can produce all kinds of water out of it. It's just running the system, separating the water.
You're just chucking it away.
Well, you're putting it back in the water table, are you not? Well, you can. Some people do. But remember, you're condensing that water. So you're taking pure water out. You're making that water worse than it was to begin with. So what do you want to use it for? You might want to flush it down the toilet or do something like that. And we do have people who separate that water into systems, but we're not quite up to that level of environmental safety yet that we can, you know, have these closed. And there's a way that you can produce a house that the water doesn't leave the house. It goes in cycles, right? They've got them, the biodome. There's no water leaving the biodome. It's all refiltered, repurculated, refiltered, and sent back into the taps or the toilets or wherever else. The water doesn't leave the cycle.
System. This is exactly what it is. Like
Yep.
boiler and drinkable water.
Okay. I have to see the application as to what they've got going there. But yeah, there's lots of applications where we've gone in and put multiple systems in for people. And one system feeds the house, the other system feeds the drinking water taps, and it's all the same. But why would you process that water to the level of drinking to flush your toilet? It doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. You can put the dirtiest water in the world in your toilet and flush it. Who cares? Except you lift up the toilet and you go, ooh, that's not very clean looking. But that's just it's perspective, right? Yeah, you're not drinking it. And as long as most people understand that, you know, if you're living in a house and you got dirty toilets, and then you tell people, oh, don't worry, that's not the same water that's coming out the tap, that's just toilet water, they won't care. But, you know, unsightly toilets are not always...
We're just going to drink wine anyway, right?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, yeah.
Maybe it's getting
Yeah,
to 12,
I'm fine with that.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm fine.
I don't expect you to give us our
No,
full day.
I'm talking.
I
That's
do-
too much.
Well, it's great. No, it's great information. I'm wondering also too, can you tell us what the most common causes of bacteria in drilled wells would be?
Drilled wells, improper casing application. Improper casing. So typically what we do there is we just go in and apply, oh, okay, sorry.
Trying to save you some stuff.
That's great, thanks.
Thanks.
Typically then you're going to investigate the well.
Okay.
Oh yeah, here, take the rest. I need one just to talk off of real quick. We'll just take the 2 minutes on this.
Sure.
But
I can never read these.
yeah, but that's why I wanted just to pull it out just to show you how to read it right. But back to that other question. So if there is a problem with bacteria coming out of a drilled well, first thing you're going to do is get either a camera down there, okay, and investigate. If you see water coming in where it shouldn't be coming in, like right where that steel joins into the rock,
Yes.
that's not where you want to see water. You want to see water down past that coming in through the aquifers in the ground. If you don't, then they can run a liner inside the well. And what they'll do is you got a 6-inch well, they'll run a 4-inch pipe inside of that with this reversed cone that pushes down. And then they fill up between the two with a product called bentonite, which is like a concrete. As soon as it gets wet, it swells and seals off. So any water coming in between those two layers just basically gets sealed off.
So that'd be more affordable than drilling as well.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. You can run a liner in an existing well for about $1,500, and that'll solve you thousands of dollars in water treatment. Because if you've got that bacteria coming in, most likely you got dirt, you got organics, you got all kinds of other problems that are coming in at the same time. So you start trying to solve that list of problems, you're going to be talking big dollars. Big dollars.
That's the first I've heard of that.
Yeah. So anyway, on the first page of this water test is the coliform and E. coli. You'll never find E. coli in water without coliform. You're always going to have coliform show up before you get the E. coli. Coliform is considered to be an indicator species for potential bigger problems, which is why they have a zero tolerance policy now, and the word absent is there. They used to give you a tolerable amount, 1 to 10. So that's gone now because of Walkerton. Walkerton, they now want 0 numbers, so they've gone from the number system to a presence-absence, which now saves the lab technicians from looking at a Petri dish and going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you're paying a guy $100,000 a year to count little dots on a dish. They don't do that anymore. They have a little vial, the one that we bring them from your sample, and they add a little dye to it, and they put the cap back on, and they stick it in an incubator. 24 hours later, they come, they take it out. If it's changed colors, fail. Pass, fail. So absent means pass. It's clear from coliform and E. coli. That's all you're expecting. If you get a present on something, you can also go back and ask if you got a bigger problem, like you might have just a background bacteria. And background bacteria are everywhere in your kitchen, by the way. If you were to just go into a kitchen and turn the tap on and draw a water sample from the kitchen sink, you're going to fail. Because the coliform's in your mouth. Every warm-blooded mammal on the planet has coliform in your mouth. As soon as it goes through your digestive system and comes out the other end, it's now E. coli. Okay, so you're never going to have the coliform without the E. coli. Once you get the two of them in line, if you have a bigger problem and you don't know whether you've got the background bacteria, which is 1 or 10 coming off the kitchen faucet, or if it's in the well and you got a 10,000 count down there, you can go back to the lab, pay a little bit more, and get the Petri test done, which is called an MPN test. So we've done those plate counts before for people when they, what kind of a problem have we got? Okay, well, you do a plate count. Oh, you've only got 5 bacteria in the water. That's a minor. 10 years ago, you wouldn't have a problem. And, you know, you're swapping that many coliform with someone just having a face-to-face conversation because your mouth is loaded with coliform. Okay? Any questions on that? Ultraviolet light, by the way, would be the answer to that page. If any of those were present, you would just throw in a UV light. So the next page is really one of the bigger pages there. And you're talking now, it starts off with pH. pH here is in the range, and the range is 6.5 to 8.5, and that pH comes in at 6.7. So that's in the clear range. None of these numbers here, by the way, are in bad shape. But if you look, it says GS. GS is Guideline Standard. Now, there are 2 guideline standards, but they don't break them down on that form for you. One is the AO guideline, which is the aesthetic objectives, and the other one is the mandatory acceptable concentrations, or the MAC guidelines. They don't tell you, except the little AO there tells you it's aesthetic guideline, and if it says MAC after it, then it's a drinking water guideline that you have to adhere to. But that's what that is the guideline standard row, and anything there is basically just a number to tell you what you have to meet. Okay, if like under arsenic, it says 10 there. So you have to be under 10 in order to reach the guideline standard. Then if you look over next to that, it says RDL. RDL stands for the reportable detectable limit. What does that mean? That means does the water, reportable detectable limit, does the test get down lower than that number? And the answer is no. So if there's a 1 there, they can't give you a 0. They can give you a 1 on the test, but they can't give you a 0 because they can only, and well, let's talk about arsenic because arsenic has a reportable detectable limit of 2. So they will not give you a 1. You'll never find an arsenic sample coming back with a 1. It will have a less than 2 number because 2 is the reportable detectable limit. That's as low as they can detect, so they will put a less than symbol in front of the number 2 telling you it's less than 2, which means it's less than detectable for their equipment. Okay, so that's what the RDL is telling you, what the lowest number that you can see show up on the next list. Now, the next list is the actual address, which is what I use when I do my water testing. I use the address of the location because to me, I'm dealing with half of my work is real estate deals. I'm dealing with a homeowner and then a new homeowner, and whose name do I put it under? How do I find it later? It's easier just to go by address for me. So any water test that I do will always have the address of the location. So exactly. So when you find the address and you look down that column, those are the actual test results that are there. Everything over to the left of that is all just telling you what the reportable detectable limits are and the guideline standards. Okay? So it's pretty straightforward. This test, I just grabbed it off my computer. It was an old one from 2014, and it's actually from Westwood Boulevard up here, Hammonds Plains way. But I think that house is long since. But you can see that those numbers are all pretty good. There's really nothing failing on that test. You can see there's one down there, right below hardness. It says Langelier Index. Now I know Langelier Index is kind of a, most people don't have a clue what it is. Langelier Index is telling you whether or not your water is corrosive or aggressive. So if you have a negative number there, which we do, and it's done by temperature, by the way, because what's the word I'm looking for? The aggressiveness of the water is dependent on the temperature of the water. The warmer the water, the more aggressive it is. So hot water heaters get eaten like crazy because the hotter the water, the more aggressive the water is in the hot water heater. Colder the water is, the less aggressive it is.
So it ruins anything.
The hotter it is, the faster it'll ruin it. Okay? So the Langelier Index here is broken down into temperatures, so it tells you how aggressive it is at what temperatures. If you have a negative number, it means your water is corrosive. Corrosive, depending on a -1, is not nearly as bad as a -10. You get a -10 in there and your faucets are not going to last you very long. Your hot water heater is not going to last you very long because your water is going to be attacking everything it comes in contact with. Now the Langelier Index is a measurement of minerals in your water. It's a measurement of the positively charged minerals, the negatively charged minerals, canceling one another out. You take a negative and a positive, you got a nothing. You do that right down the list of all the water numbers on that page, and you're going to end up with what? A couple of numbers that have either a negative or a positive attached to them. In this case, we have a negative number, which means the water is slightly aggressive.
What would be a concern level? When you look at one of these, -1, you go, okay, that's a
After -5, you start to go,
After -5.
you're starting to scratch your head and go, this is water that could be aggressive. But
Is there a fix?
yeah, you're going to adjust your pH up. You change the pH. Water treatment system. Yeah, there's a bunch. Not a softener. Softener's not going to solve that problem. You're going to be either putting in a calcium bed, which is going to increase the hardness of the water, but also increase the calcium level in the water and increase the pH in the water. Okay, but that's going to harden your water. Or you can go with a chemical pump, putting in a chemical called pH up, or liquid sodium hydroxide, which will then raise the pH of the water. And I'm talking faster because everybody wants to go. There you go. So raising the pH of the water is going to also change your Langmuir index. But the Langmuir index typically, or especially here, even with that -4 and a 6.7 pH, I'm not going to tell the customer to go crazy and do anything on that, because the cost of fixing the pH and raising that is going to cost you more ultimately in the long run than buying a new set of kitchen faucets every 5 or 10 years. So you got to use a little bit of common sense on it too and go, what's best for the customer? I'm not all about taking money from people. I'm all about solving problems. So solve a problem, you'll get another customer back. Okay? So that's, I think we're on our last little page here, which really nothing more there that we, and yeah, so you look there at the top, the anion and the cation. Those are, anions are negatively charged ions and cations are positively charged ions. So basically that's part of the Langmuir index right there. And then down there it's giving you you're starting off at aluminum, which by the way, a lot of people get misunderstanding on aluminum. Did you know there's no acceptable concentration for aluminum in drinking water? I don't understand why, but there is not. You can have massive aluminum accounts and it does not affect the drinking water. Now, it affects other things. I've heard rumors of Alzheimer's and things like that, because that's why they got rid of some of the aluminum cookware, because it was putting too much aluminum in. But yet, naturally forming aluminum is, there's no level. But it's not natural when it's in your pot. Okay? So, started, okay. There's really nothing on that. That's just A to Z. As you can see, it goes all the way through. Everything is in that, and you can see a lot of that less than symbol in front of some of those numbers, which means it's non-detectable. Okay? Everything else is...
So when you quickly look at one of these, you look at greater than symbols.
Or less than symbol, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Less than are not a concern.
Yeah, less than symbol means it's non-detectable.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what I mean
So you
is
see those, you go...
For the greater ones, and you go, okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
How much greater is it? And then, I mean, obviously, we all know the polyform and the equal. And the other thing would
the Langmuir index. You don't get those on anything other than a standard water analysis. Your budget homeowner package is only going to give you 4 criteria off this page.
Yeah, this is the full blown.
This is the full blown.
And this is how much?
This is $300. Yep.
Plus 40.
Plus 40, yes. But if you want to do it yourself, it's 300. But by the way, if you're a real estate agent and you're testing your own water, you're silly.
You're not allowed. The broker in the room, they know that.
But there are some real estate agents who still do it.
Yeah.
But as this organization, it's a wonderful thing for you guys not to be able to do it. Number one, it puts you in a conflict, right? Number two, are you as informed as me? So, you know, it's just sampling. Do you know how many times I get emergency calls? We just did the test, it failed. And we went back and we did another one and it failed. And on the third one, buyer can walk away. So they call me up and now it's my turn to go in and I only got 1 strike left.
Technically, buyer can walk away.
They can, but 3 strikes usually,
Usually. Yeah.
you know,
I have had buyers walk on the first one.
and they're silly if they do that because it's so easy for a failure to happen. Yeah, that's for this firm, yes. But there's lots of smaller independent guys who go out and do their own testing, and it's just a nightmare of problems that can occur. So you bring in someone like me, we come in. Testing is an art all in itself. If I go out and if I don't prepare the faucet properly, I'm going to fail, which is what happens 9 times out of 10. Real estate agents go in, they just take the end of the faucet off, take a lighter out, and they're holding the lighter. And in the meantime, they're ruining the faucet because they're burning it. They don't get enough heat generated to kill the bacteria in the first place, so they're not doing anything other than damaging the faucet. I use a chlorine, I hate chlorine, but I use chlorine, and I spray it up into the faucet. If you got a pull-out sprayer, I'll pull the pull-out sprayer right off and remove it, because that's your bacteria source right there. I'll put that on the side of the counter, and then I'll test directly out of the hose after first submersing that hose down into the chlorine and letting it kill. Now you can get a possible clean count if the well's going to support it, and let it run, of course.
What about the alcohol swabs?
You're only going to get, unless you're using enough to spray in, you're not going to get that with a rub. You're not. So I use a Windex. Way better, yes, but still you're only getting that surface. Yeah. And when you shut your faucets off on a tap, the water pressure back there is being held, and that's where all of the good water is kept at. As soon as it goes through the faucet and it's not quite dispensed, it didn't make it out the tap, but you shut your tap off, so that water's sitting in the spout. That water's contaminated. How are you going to clean that with a rub? That's where my spray can goes in, and I spray it right down into the faucet. Then I give it contact time to kill, and then I run all that chlorine off before I do the test. In a nutshell, that's what I do, but every faucet I walk into is another challenge. Mm-hmm. Some of them are pull-out sprayers, some of them are just standard taps. I never ever test out of an outside garden hose. I very, very rarely have had luck. They always fail because you just can't get a clean sample out of a garden spigot.
So in the valley, we don't take the tests per se ourselves. We go with the client and the client take the sample. The sample they themselves have to take to wherever they're going. They don't have as much options to hire someone themselves.
Right.
I'm sure you're not going to pay $40 as much as you'd love to.
Much as I like to for $40, no.
Right. So we are tasked with that quite often. And so in a case like that, instead of using the alcohol swabs, which is what I've been using,
get a Windex spray bottle.
And just spray
50-50 Javex water in it. And that's what I use. And I don't use a Windex bottle because you don't want to mist.
No, I would just buy something for $2 short.
Yeah, then don't do that because that's not going to last. Well, unless you want to change it every now and then, but chlorine's going to kill that little spray bottle. Yeah, but the problem is the chemical will just chew the bottle up. It's not the plastic bottle, it's the spray mechanism. Yeah, plus it'll leak all over the place.
Okay, so
I buy a proper chemical. If you get not Windex is not a good example, but one of your spray cleaners that you might get for your bathroom that has the pump sprayer on it that's got a good heavy mixture in there, empty all that out or save one and then fill that up with Javex water and your sprayer will work. But you want a stream.
Can you buy this bottle somewhere? Like,
Yep.
I don't want to
I buy them at Bevington Chemicals here in Burnside.
Okay, so if I went to like place that sells hot tubs, they have it.
Good question. Good question. But you definitely want a solid spray, not a mist. You want a stream because you want to have it force up into the faucet. So, and then that's where I get the one that has the little twist nozzle on the end, and then I can spray it, stream.
Okay.
Plus, they're going to make a mess. If you don't have, I have a little container that I carry with it all the time. If you don't have that, my God, you're going to have chlorine all over your car. You're going to have it just.
I use alcohol instead of.
But it's not as effective. I mean, if you're getting results and you're not, but take that sprayer off.
Always. Oh.
Yeah, and that's where a little bit of Javex and water. It's so much easier if you remove the sprayer, you can just fill up a glass with water, put a little bit of bleach in there, and then just submerge the whole hose in there, and hold it in there for 3-4 minutes. Pull it out, and then what I always do is don't let that go without that sprayer on there. That'll drop down in behind the sink, and so what I do is when I get the hose right where I want it, usually there's a face cloth and then just jam it up in between the hose and the faucet, and that'll lock it in. Yeah, but you got to stand there for 5 minutes at least. You got to run the water, and if you're going to run the water cold before you begin sterilizing. That way you've got the water freshened up and you're not, spraying water. Because once you take the sprayer off there, water's splashing all over the kitchen as you're trying to do the thing. But yeah, if you ever have questions or if you want those spray bottles, they're not that expensive, but they're over at Bevington Chemicals. But they got 2 of them. Thank you. You're welcome. And they got 2.
Is it a big bottle or a small one?
They're about that tall.
Well, then I may as well just, okay. I
Yeah.
prefer to have something smaller just because I carry so much junk. Nice not to have the big bottle.
And these are 1 liter spray bottles. They're round, about that big around. And I always have
Liter bottle.
multiple of them. different sprays that I use for different purposes for cleaning stuff, but yeah. All right, anybody have any more questions online? I guess we're going to wrap this up, so I got some cards, yep.
Andy, I have a question.
Sure.
It's probably a little bit. Why would anybody test the raw water going in before it goes through the system?
Because that answers the question of why the system is there. If you want to know what's all this gear there for, I got a call the other night. The lady sent me all this information. I went, yeah, but this is all treated water. And she said, yeah. And I said, well, why is it there? What was the reason why this $5,000 worth of gear was put in there in the first place? And she said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, I will know as soon as we do a raw water test. I will be able to tell you exactly what you were up against. So really, you want both. But that's the perfect world. Now try and do that $300 test on both. Now you're looking at $600 and 40.
Yeah, but the big issue we had, I thought it was
Yes.
the raw water showed iron way at
Yeah.
1,000.
That's nothing.
Great distance.
Yeah.
But they walk like it's just
Uneducated.
they got no they
That's yeah, perfect water.
and
Yeah, he's a
said absolutely.
yeah. Well, I can show you one of his fixes that he had 5 water conditioners in a house for a customer. Yeah, 5 of them. And I went in and I said to the guy, I said, this is nuts. I said, half of your problem is you got 5 water conditioners doing 5 backwashes at 5 different nights of the week. I said, you're draining your well, you're stressing out your water table, and you're causing more bad water to come in. We turned it all off and put a liner down as well.
Right.
I put a $1,000 water conditioner in and walked away, and the customer has never seen such good water. Mind you, we did have to do the outside work too, but that's part of why we do what we do, is because I go in. If you can fix something out in the well, far smarter than applying all kinds of fixes inside the house. So I identified a problem that was happening in the well, had the well drillers come back and fix that problem, and then once we reassessed the water, it was a whole different picture. Probably could have been the same there.
So I was representing the seller, so obviously what we should have done is had
A second opinion.
Second opinion, because they were just, and it was too bad of the house.
Yep.
But this guy, God, and
He recommends me too.
well,
I'm on his report. If you read Dean Walker's reports, he lists 3 different people. Yeah.
Anyway, make a long story short,
That's too bad.
and it's,
But the water tested good after the systems, but they still walked.
well,
Ah.
and that's,
Iron's not a...
no, that's,
No.
that's the part I don't,
Yeah.
understand.
Iron's too common to, especially in Nova Scotia. All the rock in Nova Scotia is iron bearing.
And this is
So,
so
yeah.
there is no thought.
Yep.
But it was just, because it was so wacky.
That's not wacky though. It sounds high because the numbers now, they used to have fractions and percentage, like decimal points. And it was just too much for people to wrap their heads around all these decimal point numbers. So they switched from parts per million testing to parts per billion testing. Now the numbers are astronomical in iron. Sodium, the level used to be 220 parts per million. Now the guideline is 220,000 micrograms per liter. That's a scary number, but not 220 parts per million. It's the same number. It's just expressed in parts per billion as parts per million. So a lot of people don't understand that it's a very, very, very minute number that you're talking about to have a 1 on that test. So to go to a 5,000, 10,000, that's nothing. That's not even 1 part per million in the old scales. And 15 parts per million or 150,000 is not even a problem. It's not, that's more commonplace than not today. So.
What about radon?
What about radon? Radon is always associated with uranium.
Okay.
So if you have a uranium test show up, I'm always cautioning the customer to get a radon test done at the real estate deal at the same time. But you're never going to have radon without having some uranium, usually, unless the water's coming in another way. If it's a city water supply, well, you can't depend on that test but if you've got well water, the uranium count is going to be a clue because radon starts as uranium and then transfers over into radon. So yeah, that's a good point. You want to make sure that the radon is definitely not present. Although most houses today, radon's not even an issue. They're building the radon ports right into the houses. You see the white pipe sticking out of the floor? And if for new houses, but still, you know what? To put a hole in a concrete floor isn't a big deal. I can do it in 20 minutes. Just get a big concrete saw and put a hole in the floor, mount the pipe, and then all you're doing is you're sucking air from underneath the foundation and throwing it outside before the radon rises up to the house. So it's easy peasy to deal with. Yeah, well.
Could I have a copy of the first hand? Yeah.
The impurities one? I thought I got one.
I came, you know, late.
Oh, you came in late. Sorry.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you very much,
You're
Randy. That was awesome.
most
Well,
welcome.
We knew it was last year, and not all of us could attend. Anyone that didn't get to attend really were upset because they heard how great it was. So thank you for coming back.
Yeah, thank you.
I know
You're
we
most
were a
welcome.
smaller
Thank
group,
you.
but we had quite a few online.
Well, yeah, and the online stuff is interesting.